Ted's death in May of 1999 threw me for a loop. But now, after 26 years since he's been gone, I can look back on things and see that there were many blessings that came around that time and afterwards. To begin with, in Christmas 1998, we took a trip with friends from the church, other couples, and people we'd met in Waco, a bus trip to Branson, Missouri, and for the Christmas shows. And that was a wonderful time. We really had a good time. And there's a picture made, and I think that's the last picture that Ted and I had made together. That was a wonderful trip, and also at Christmas time that year, the family all gathered at our house, and there's I think a picture of Gwen and baby Brady opening presents sitting on the floor. So I had good memories of family up to that time. And one other one of Ted, because of Valentine, right before that May, I was asked to conduct a party for our Sunday school class, which was a couples class, and lead that program and do love songs and music. And he agreed to sing with me. He had a good voice, but he never usually sang, out too much, or he didn't do solos or anything like that. But he did that for me, and we sang the 12th of Never together. And even though he was not openly demonstrative, when we finished, he gave me a kiss in front of everybody. So that was a great memory. Well, when he died that morning, after we got up, because it had been 11 o'clock that night when he died, there was a knock on the door at 8 o'clock, and it was two of my fraternity sisters, Mary Mabry and Eleanor Raines, that had already heard of the death, and they said, "We're here to help. What can we do?" And Angela said, "Well, Mom wants the house cleaned up before everybody starts gathering, because with Dad having been sick for 3 weeks, everything's kind of dirty and messy, dusty." And they dove right in. I can still see Mary Mabry working in the kitchen, cleaning up things, and Eleanor dusting the furniture and the bookcase. Good friends is a blessing. Then that morning, also, Gwen drove into the driveway and got out of the car, and when she came to the door, she had kind of a dazed look, but a glow on her face. And I said, "Gwen, are you okay?" She said, "Oh, Grandmommy, about 2 weeks ago, one of my fellow workers' friends' grandparents died in a car wreck." And she said, we were talking to her about it at work afterwards, and she said she had a dream about them last night, and they came to her as two butterflies. Her grandmother was a yellow butterfly, but it had her grandmother's face, and the brown butterfly had her grandfather's face. And she said, they said, "Don't worry about us, we're okay." And so she said, just now, when I got out of the car, a brown butterfly lit on my shoulder. And it was like it was Granddaddy. And it stayed on my shoulder all the way down to the patio door. Until I opened the door, it flew away. And so I said, well, what a wonderful sign, because, butterflies are a symbol of new life. So anyway, that was a blessing that came that morning. Well, the kids all came over and went with me to the funeral home to make arrangements, because we had not done that at that time. And we picked out a mahogany casket that looked like would go great for a construction person. And planned the funeral for visitation on Friday night and the service at the church on Saturday afternoon at 2 p.m. And my Sunday school class, of couples said they wanted to prepare lunch for our family. And I said, well, you know, we have a big family, and so there'll probably be 50 people there. And they said, that's okay. Well, then I kept hearing some more were coming, and it went to 60, and then it went to 75. And I apologized that there might be that many to eat. They said, that's all right. We've already planned for 100 or 110. We're going to stay there and eat with y'all too. So that turned out to be another blessing from our friends in Sunday school. The funeral was very nice. There were a lot of people there. The sanctuary was full, even the balcony. And I recalled that once Ted had said after we made the new church that he hoped someday to see that sanctuary filled. And it was that day. We went to the cemetery, and Steve Manson, who was the preacher, had done the funeral, and he was doing that that thing also at the cemetery. And a brown butterfly lit on his shoulder. And it stayed there while he was talking and gave the opening prayer and all that. And then it flew over and lit on some of the flowers on his grave and just stayed around there. And for weeks after any of us would go to the cemetery, when we come back, we'd always say, there was a brown butterfly there again around the flowers, flitting around. And my sister, Maureen, told me this story. They had come down from Philadelphia, and actually the car that I'd driven Ted to the hospital that day for surgery was still in the parking lot of the surgical vehicles. And I said, somebody has to go after that car. So Ted Jr. said, well, I'll take care of that, Mom, and I'll drive it. So Maureen and Neil said they would ride with them. And they did. And I think I've mentioned about Ted cutting the radio off to talk to me that morning. Well, I think it was actually a CD that he liked to listen to. And anyway, Rennie said as they turned into the cemetery, the radio kicked on. I don't know if Ted's hand bumped the knob or what as he was turning, but it came on with the Aggie Warham, Hullabaloo, Connect, Connect. She said, I got goosebumps all over me. It was like Ted was talking to us. Funny stories like that I remember from his death. Well, things went on. Family was very supportive. And my oldest grandson, DL, who had now graduated from high school, called me and said, Grandmommy, I would like to move in with you, so you won't be alone. I'd move into one of your bedrooms, because I've seen recently where a few people have had people breaking into their houses or attacking somebody when they read about a funeral in the paper. And I don't want that to happen to you. So I said, well, you'd certainly be welcome, DL. So he moved in, and actually it worked out good for him too, because he was working for a Lockridge Priest Plumbing Company, and they were doing a job in Killeen. And their truck would just stop by for him every morning and drive him to work, and then drop him off in the afternoons. And so he was there with me. And then when I had to be out of town, my house would not be empty either. I had a lot of business, paperwork, legal things to take care of that first month, which took time and lots of thought. And I also had multiple vehicles. I had that blue van, my own car, a pickup, 5 antique cars, and a tractor that something had to be done with. And so I had lots to take care of. the first time I went somewhere after that was in, Angie called me because Taylor was in this dance group and they were going to a competition in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And she said, Mom, we're all going and make it a family vacation. Why don't you go with us? And that will help you, since you've been so busy with Dad's business and all the things, it'll be a good vacation for you. So I agreed. And I rode on the back seat with Maddie in her car seat, who was about 9 or 10 months old then, and all the way to Carolina and back in a 9-passenger van. I did bond with her that way and had time with the grandchildren, but it wasn't that much fun for me because I still was grieving for Ted. And about the time I got back from there, I got a call from Linda that my dad had some dizzy spells, and they had discovered that he had blockage in one of his carotid arteries and would need surgery. And this was August now, and she was preparing to go back to school as she was teaching. Could I come and help? So I took a plane from Killeen to Odessa and was there for Dad's surgery, then went back to her house with him in Crane when he came back from the hospital. And an interesting thing happened there one night when she was washing dishes at the sink. I heard her say something and say, Ted. And I said, what did you say? She said, oh, it was just a brown butterfly lit on the outside of the screen and like looking in to the house. And she said, I looked up and saw it, and it made me think of Ted. And I just said, it's okay, Ted. She's here. She's well. I'll take care of her. She's doing fine. But I wasn't totally doing fine. I began having pain in my right hand and numbness in my fingers, and it going up my arm, and I began to break out in this rash. So I went to the doctor there in Crane, and she said, my dear, you have shingles. And I did have a really bad case of them, and it went from the tips of my fingers on my right hand up through my right shoulder blade. And that was painful, and when it quit hurting, then my fingers were numb for about 3 months. I didn't realize at the time, but I know now that that was a part of my physical grieving over losing my husband. Well, I got back from there, and then Angela called me again and said, Mom, I have to go to New York to meeting at Sloan Kettering. I'm representing MD Anderson at a conference of cancer finance people. And come and go with me. The hotel room will be paid by my company, and it won't cost you anything but your airfare and maybe a little to eat. And we'll have nights free. It'll be about a 3 or 4 day conference. And then we can go to a Broadway show, or we can go to FOA Schwartz and buy some presents for the kids for Christmas. And I think it'll be good for you to get away. So I agreed to go. And on the morning that we were to go, I got on a plane in Waco, a connecting plane to her plane in Houston, and joined her on that plane. And in the plane ride, I began to feel sick. My stomach was hurting, and I thought it was something I'd eaten or something. But it got worse, and we got there in New York and checked into the hotel, and I was lying down while Angela went to her first meeting. And I was hurting more and more. And when she got back, I told her I didn't feel like going out eating or anything. I was hurting so bad. And I was just laying there with my eyes closed and trying not to moan. And I heard her call her friend, and she said, "My mom's really sick. If I have to take her to the emergency room, where should I go?" And the girl from New York said, "Well, for goodness sake, don't take her to New York General. That's where they have gunfights and knife people coming in there from some kind of crime. Take her either to Mount Sinai or Lenox Hill." And so about 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the morning, I said, "Angela, I'm going to have to go to the hospital. I really feel too bad." So she got a taxi, and she asked the man, "Do we want to go to either Mount Sinai or Lenox Hill, the emergency room?" And he said, "Well, Mount Sinai is about 45 minutes from here. Lenox Hill is just 5 minutes down the road on Park Avenue." And she said, "Well, take us there." And I'm sure that was a God thing, because the doctor that was on duty in the emergency room that night was a full-fledged doctor, someone who had come to the United States from Croatia, and not just an intern and he immediately inserted an NG tube into my stomach through my nose, and this cruddy-looking stuff was coming out, and he kind of knocked me out. And when I kind of came out of it, I was in a room, and Angela said, "Mom, the surgeon's been here, and he said you have a stomach blockage. We don't know what it is. It could be a tumor, it could be something else, but something is blocking your intestine, and everything's backing up, and he said your kidneys are shutting down." And, "Well, Mama," he said, they need to do emergency surgery." I said, "Well, if you think it might be a tumor, could be cancer, I'd like to get her back to Houston, to MD Anderson." He said, "My dear, your mother's got about 48 hours to live the way her body's reacting. We need to do surgery now." So she called my sister Maureen in Philadelphia, and she said, "We'll be there." And so she and her husband said they'd get on the train and come. And this was, by then, early Wednesday morning. And she said, "Mom, I'm going down to meet Renee. They arrived on the train," and she called, "They're coming by taxi, and I'll be back up." And while she was down to meet them, the surgeon came in to me, and he said, "Mrs. Babb, has your daughter explained to you how serious this is? We need to do the surgery to see what's wrong, or we're going to lose you." And I said, "Well, then, what are you waiting for? Get the show on the road, boy." And he started laughing, and he brought me the papers. I said, "I'll sign them." And I signed for surgery. And when Renee and Angela and Neil walked in the room, I said, "I just signed the papers. They're fixing to come after me for surgery." Well, the doctor said, "Your mom signed for surgery, and we're getting ready to take her now." And that's the first time I've been called boy in about 20 years, because she said, "We'll get the show on the road, boy." So they did the surgery. And when I came to from that, they said, "How are you doing?" I said, "I'm doing fine." They gave me this little button, and if I hurt, I just to push it, and that's all. Then I feel okay. I was kind of drunk from whatever it was to keep me from hurting so bad. But that worked. That was a Wednesday afternoon, and I had that, and that would have been Thursday morning. And they expected everything to go fine. But by Friday, my body was still not opening up. And Angela had called Alicia, because there she was, still there, and Brad's home with the 4 kids, and Maddie's under a year old, and she really needed to go back. So Alicia said, I'll come. As a nurse, she said, when you had the relapse, and they said they had to put the NG tube back in, which really hurt that time, I knew I needed to come. So she came, and they switched places. But on that Friday, a new doctor came in to see me. His name was Dr. Newworth. And he was a psychologist or psychiatrist or something, but he talked to me and he said, Mrs. Babb, I need to talk to you. He said, I talked to your daughter and about what's going on because you're not getting well and you should be now. We fixed the problem surgically. And he said, she told me that you lost your husband recently. And I think this is part of your grieving. And I just want you to talk to me about it a little bit. And I guess maybe I said, well, I haven't been happy since he died. I've tried to go on and take care of things, but I don't know what all I said to him really now. But he said to me, your husband would not want you to give up. You've still got years ahead of you and children and grandchildren that need you and things that are planned. God probably has planned for your life, and you need to tell your body to get well. I'm serious. I want you to start talking to your intestine and say, wake up, intestine, and do your job. Can you do that? And I said, well, I guess so, and I thought, this guy's a little bit nuts, but okay. So anyway, and he came in again later and he said, I really hate to do this, but I'm going to have to leave town. I've been scheduled for a year to give this talk at a seminar in California. And I agreed to go, but I wanted to talk to you more, but my colleague's going to come in to see you. Now, but I want you to remember what I said. I want you to talk to your intestine. Tell it to wake up. I said, okay, enjoy your trip, So Saturday night, the phone rings. And Angela answered it, and she said, Mom, it's Dr. Newworth from California. This man I've only known 2 days, okay, he wants to talk to you. So I answered, hello, and he said, Mrs. Babb, we had a break in the conference, and I just wanted to call and ask you, are you talking to your intestine, telling it to wake up? And I kind of got tickled, and I said, well, yes, Dr. Newworth, I'm even singing it a song. He said, oh? And I said, yes, wake up, little Susie, wake up. And he started laughing then. He said, I think you're going to make it now. You're going to be on the road to recovery. Well, this was like a God thing too, because I'd never met this man, but somebody that God put in my way. I stayed in that hospital for 10 days before I was well enough to come home. But also, the morning after surgery, when I was looking out through the open door to the hallway, sitting on a table was this gorgeous bouquet of yellow roses, a dozen yellow roses. And when the nurse came in, I said, what pretty flowers out there. She said, oh, well, those are yours, Miss Babb. I said, mine? She said, yes. A young dark-headed man brought them in last night and said they were for you. And I said, well, you can't go in the room. She just had surgery. So he put them there on the table and said for me to bring them to you this morning. So she said, I'll go get them. And she brought them and brought them over and let me smell of them, and they smelled so good. And she set them in, and she watered them. And I said, where's the card with it? And she said, she looked, there's no card. So I didn't know who the dark young-headed man was. But those roses stayed pretty the whole time I was there. The 10th day, when I left the hospital, they were still as pretty as they'd been the first day. And we sent them to the floor where the orthopedic people were for them to enjoy, because we couldn't take them on the plane. Alicia had stayed for part of that time, and then Teddy and Annette came up to take me home because she needed to get back to work also. So all three of my kids got a trip to New York, although it wasn't what they planned, but to take care of Mom. But what a blessing they were to me. And Ted and Annette flew me home on the plane, and Gwen met us in Dallas with a van with a mattress in the back for me to lie down on to go on home. And I had instructions that I was not to drive for 6 weeks. I was not to lift anything over 5 pounds for 6 weeks. And so I was confined to home, but Angela had found a lady that would come to the house, and that's when I met Kyla McMullen, who started out to be somebody that helped clean my house and visit about once every 2 or 3 weeks after that for a while, for a long time. I know that God was not through with me yet, and so I hadn't grieved like I should have, and my body was just reacting to that. So I did take grief counseling after that and went into it, and there were 4 or 5 ladies in it, and we were able to share our thoughts, and it helped me. And I began to live my life again. And one of the another blessings that came of that while he had passed, my friends in the teacher sorority gave a special scholarship that year in honor of him, and it was given to a girl from Lorena who was going to go to A&M, and that was Amy McKnight, and there's a picture of us presenting that to her. That was in the spring then of 2000 when she got her scholarship. And in May of that year also, no, it wasn't May, it was August of 2000. I got a call from Steve Seeley, and he said, my dad just died. This was my sister Gladys's husband. He died unexpectedly. He had surgery for cancer, and that morning he aspirated on some medicine, or anyway, he died within 4 minutes, they said, before the ambulance could get there. And so then I needed to go to be with my sister to help her in her grief, which I did. And while I was there, I agreed to join her because every year they had gone in their RV to Florida, and Gladys was director of their recreation stuff, the bingo and the music stuff and all that. And she and Barry had done that, and she said she was going to need some help. So I told her I would come and help her when the time came. And so after the funeral, and he was buried very nice in a military service since he'd been in the Seabees for almost 30 years. He's buried in Clarksville, West Virginia, in a military cemetery. Well, I came home from that, and I made arrangements to go back and join her in Florida, which I did. And while we were there, she got me involved in some of the activities too. I think there was a picture of her she's doing a hula with the girls and all, and there's a picture. Debbie and I on the back with her because Debbie drove her. Her daughter drove her in the motorhome down there to do that and stayed with her mother. And then she even recruited us on their show that they had for everybody did some kind of a performance to do something silly, and we did the chicken song. I was the farmer and Debbie was the wife, and if you've never heard that, that's a good song. I got involved in other things too. The Women's Club in Lorena in 2000 was 100 years old, and they begun deciding to have some kind of a special program for that. And when looking at the 1903 minutes, they saw where the ladies said then they hoped someday to start a library for Lorena. And so Lorena had never had a library. So we said that would be a great project for the 100th year. And the school had just finished building a new high school along with the junior high and elementary that they had. And that building was going to be vacant. And at the one end of it was the administration building, which had been originally the old cottage that the Lorena Women's Club had met in, and they had let the school take it over for their home economics classes. So they said we could have that building back, and we decided to put in a library. And one of the ladies, Ms. Bartley, said she had quite an extensive book collection of her own. She would donate the first 500 books to get the library started, which she did. And I went to her house along with one other lady who went along, and we boxed up the ones that she had given us and brought those back and began refurbishing the building. Needed painting and new shades for the windows, and we fixed a ramp so that Ms. Bartley, who was in a wheelchair, could also come to the meetings, and painting and the plumbing, and got everything ready for our open house. And I spent many afternoons cataloging those 500 books. And a lady named Rose Haft came and started helping me. And the school then, as well as giving us that building, said they had some old records and old trophies, and they were stored kind of under the stage in the old school, but there wasn't room for in the new trophy cases and all, that we could have those for our library. So we moved those, and we got things ready for our open house. It took us about that whole year of 2000, but then we had written, and Governor George Bush sent us a proclamation for our 100th birthday as being one of the oldest continual women's clubs in the state of Texas that had not dropped out in 100 years. And so we got ready for the open house, and we had that. And then a bookstore that closed called us and said they had 1,700 books we could have. And so I went in the van and loaded boxes of books, and Rose came, and we started again cataloging more books. And before we knew it, we had about 4,000 books in our library already because other people were donating some. And with that, the Hometown News, or maybe it was the Lorena Leopard at that time, asked me to begin writing an article once a month about the library for their newspaper. And so I did, and it was called Library Lines. And I would write about the different kinds of books that we had, biographies, history books, romances, suspense stories, and westerns. And when I wrote about that, one of the articles I wrote was also about a new western writer, someone named Ted Babb Jr., who called himself Yellow Cat Jack Babb, who had written a book called Cocklebur Tales about stories that had been told him about the Old West. And that's my son, and then there was a special article about him and his new book that he had done. And so we got that publicity. Along with that, he got so interested in the history of the West and all that he joined this group called the Cowographers, and he got his wife Annette and myself involved in that also. He would write scripts for little skits that we would put on at different places, little towns like Troy, if they had a special Saturday for their history, or Lorena had a Heritage Day, or Bruceville Eddy, or Temple, or wherever. Even the Grove, which was like a little ghost town almost, and we went there a time or two, and we would put these skits on. And I think there's a picture of me dressed as a pioneer woman, and another one that I had on kind of a fancy outfit. In that skit, I was the banker's wife that had to talk about something. Another thing that happened with Ted in the Cowographers was that he was asked to be in one of the episodes of Walker, Texas Ranger, which was one flashback of Walker's ancestor, and he was in that movie that came out. So he enjoyed that very much. My dad even went with us one time when he was visiting. Teddy bought him one of those big floppy hats, and like they wore out in Arizona, and he looked neat. And he was nearing his 90s by then, and even played dominoes with some of the men that were coming to that festival, and they had a domino band going on. Another thing that I did after that Cowographer thing was also, Angela called again and said that Taylor's dance group had been asked to perform on the cruise ship that was going from New York City to Halifax, Nova Scotia and back. They were going to be part of the entertainment for the people on the cruise, and that she was going along as a mother sponsor. And if I wanted to go, maybe Gladys would like to go also, and we would enjoy that, and we could get our own cabin, and so we decided to do that. And we went and a couple of days early, and we had some time in New York, some sightseeing, and then we got on the cruise ship and did ride to Halifax and back, and we enjoyed that. Going to the karaoke and just other things that you do, and watching the kids dance, and then even the three of us sang on the talent show. We sang How Great Thou Art, and that was well received by the people. Gladys and my sister Renee and I used to sing trios, and Angela took the high part that Maureen often sang. So that was occupying some of my time. And also, by working in the library, one of the articles that I wrote was about the Greatest Generation, when that book came out, about the people, a lot of the people in World War II. And then my Lorena Women's Club asked me to give that as a book review for their club meeting, which I did. And someone else heard about it and said, could you come and give that to our potpourri club at the women's, Waco Women's Group? And I did. And then my 80K sister said, we want to hear it. So pretty soon I had done it 3 or 4 times because Gladys got me to come to Burleson and give that book review for her AARP group. Over the years, then I began doing book reviews for people in clubs. Another one I did was Mark Lowry's autobiography. He's the man that wrote the hymn, now famous Christmas hymn, Mary Did You Know? And I would often give that book review and then end it with singing that song as a solo, which I sang sometimes for Christmas programs and at church also. Other books that I reviewed were like Brush of an Angel's Wing, Laura Bush's autobiography, Can't Wait to Get to Heaven, the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society, and The Best Christmas Pageant Ever. And every time I fixed one, I ended up giving it 3 or 4 times, which gave me something else to do, somewhere else to go. I've really stayed busy with my activities. Another thing that happened is Gladys and Debbie decided to move back to Texas, and they did, and they came in their motorhome for a while, and then they found a place in Burleson, Texas, and lived there. And now that she was back in Texas, we were able to get together and do performances again. We often did musical things with a theme, and once she called me, when she was going to be coming, we had a gig lined up at the Hamilton House and for those ladies in Waco, and she said, and I'm all excited, I bought a new pantsuit to wear. And I said, well, good. Guess what? I bought one too. And we'll both look spiffy, won't we? Well, imagine both of our shock when she walked in, and she's got the same pantsuit on that I have. I bought mine in Temple. She bought hers in Fort Worth. They were identical except for 2 different colors. Hers was purple and mine was green. Great minds run together, I guess. Well, not only had she moved back to Texas, but my daughter Angela and her husband had also moved back, and she was working at MD Anderson. Another fun thing that happened was that in 2003, I was asked to come to my 50th high school class reunion, our anniversary, and to be the person that directed the program because they had heard that I was doing programs. And I agreed, and since I didn't have a spouse to go with me, I asked Gladys if she'd like to go along. Well, I wrote the script and met with the ones who were going to take part in it and all, and it turned out to be a fun program. I started the thing with actually singing different words to the tune of Hello, Dolly. I was, well, hello, classmates. It's so great to be back home where we belong. And on from there, and then what I said, one of those old favorite songs from way back when, and the band master of our class that year blew his whistle, and they started our class song, On You Bobcats. And so that was fun. Then their class clown of our group took over and became the MC, calling on different people for things, and it was turned out to be fun. And even Gladys came along as having been a sophomore that year. She sang the #1 song on the hit parade of 1953, which was Cry. And everyone enjoyed the program, and we had a great 50th celebration. Another thing that I really enjoyed with the Lorena Women's Club was making quilts. Now that we had that building, we had the front room, which was like a meeting room of the library, was room to set up a quilt frame and quilt. And Dorothy Polly, who was one of the staunch members of that club, was a great quilter and would help you learn. And it brought back to me a skill that my grandmother had started teaching me when I was a young married woman, when she was still alive. And so I got involved in that. And we made quilts for the shut-ins, those around Lorena. We made quilts for people that had a fire. We took many to the nursing homes, to the Veterans Hospital in Waco, to individuals at home that we knew that needed one. And when Hurricane Katrina came along, we actually sent 21 quilts through the Salvation Army to the people in Houston that had flown there as refugees from the hurricane in New Orleans. And so that was something that we did that was a very worthwhile project. And I was staying busy when I was asked to give a Memorial Day talk to the Lorena Women's Club after the year of 9/11. I gave the talk at the cemetery where they met under the trees, and I spoke about the history of our military and that sort of thing. And then I talked about now our responders, first responders, firemen, policemen, and all who had rushed in the building to save people were also veterans that we had to memorialize, and that it was an important thing to remember all of our veterans, first responders, and people who gave things to each other. And I ended that talk with the last verse of the Star-Spangled Banner, which goes like this: "Oh, thus be it ever, when free men shall stand between their loved homes and the war's desolation. Blessed with victory and peace, may the heaven rescued land praise the power that hath made and preserved us a nation. Then conquer we must, when our cause it is just, and this be our motto, in God is our trust. And the Star-Spangled Banner in triumph shall wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave." Well, now it's 2003, 2004. 5 years have gone by. Lots happened in my life. I've stayed very busy. Daytime between retired teachers, Lorena Women's Club, writing newspaper articles, giving book reviews, doing musical programs with my sister, and things are much better, just that still the nights are lonely. And that song comes to my mind, that in the hush of night, exactly like a bittersweet refrain, comes that certain smile to haunt your heart again.